morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. We have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed, we do. Lots of results, of course. We've got Cenk Uygur to help us break it down and think about what is next for Bernie Sanders and for the left. We have some interesting look at the youth vote and what that portends, not just for the primary, but maybe more significantly for the fall. And Oren Cass, who we had him before, Wall Street Journal decided to do this like weird attack ad against him. We got to talk to him about that. So we're going to get into that as well.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to start with the results out of last night. Let's throw up the map, and we're going to see there basically Joe Biden winning in Michigan, in Mississippi, Missouri, and Bernie Sanders winning in Washington. Or I don't know if Washington's been called. He looks like he's ahead
Bernie's
there.
Got a little bit of an edge there. Right. It's very close, though.
And he has won. I believe the call has been made in the state of Idaho overall.
North Dakota.
Biden won Idaho. So overall, it was a pretty good night for Joe Biden. But the Michigan results, as we said yesterday, are where we need to focus. That was, of course, where they had the most amount of delegates. It's where Sanders had an upset win the last time around. And this time, Krystal, I think the main focus is on the white vote in particular. Because here, Bernie actually once again won the Hispanic vote in Michigan at 55 to 37%. So Chuck Rocha did his job again, I see. But it's actually in the white voters where Bernie overperformed last time relative to Hillary. This time, 52% of white voters, this is according to the New York Times exit polls, went for Joe Biden relative to the 42% that went for Bernie Sanders. And this is also comprises that critical demographic of non-college educated white voters, which all voted for Trump and for Bernie in 2016.
Yeah, and I believe the numbers still show that Bernie won voters under 50K.
He did.
But last time around, he had this incredible strength with rural voters that has not been there for him this time in any state. I mean, Iowa, Pete actually did really well with those voters. In every state, it seemed like
Idaho, too, you saw that happen.
Exactly, yeah. So in every state, Bernie has lagged with those white rural voters that he did so well with last time. I think it's really interesting to consider why, right? Especially when the whole purpose of the Sanders movement and this type of leftist movement, the goal is to realign the Democratic Party around a multiracial working class. So if you are not appealing to those white working class voters to bring them into that multiracial coalition, it's not going to work out for you. Now, the biggest divides here were generational.
Yes.
Again, Bernie dominates.
Absolutely.
Dominates with young voters,
and
right?
Just to give people an idea of those numbers, we're talking 18 to 29. We are talking about 77 to 19% from the New York Times exit polls. And even in below 40, 55% to 42% Biden, it's when you get 45 and over that it totally completely reverses.
Right. So Bernie is just as dominant with young voters as Biden is with the oldest demographic.
Yes.
But of course, that oldest demographic is who overwhelmingly shows up to vote. And so we are where we are. You had an interesting theory, though, that I wanted you to lay out about why Bernie is underperforming with white rural voters this time versus last time.
Two things. One I've laid out on the show. One is very possible. A lot of these people, they're Republicans now. They voted for Trump in 2016.
Yeah.
They may not have voted in the primary.
I want to see some data around that because it's interesting.
We don't have enough data on that, but that's one supposition. But two, and I think this is really what it is that Bernie last time around was able basically to outsource all of the negative attacks and the definition of Hillary Clinton to the right, because the right has been able to successfully define Hillary in the eyes of the American public all through the Clinton presidency, through the mid-2000s, 2008. Some of Obama did that as well, and then under the Obama presidency. This time around, the right never did the same thing to Joe Biden, mostly because he was such a loser, nobody ever thought he would be president, and he wouldn't be such a prominent figure. So what ended up happening is Bernie was never able to outsource that negative campaigning against Biden to the right, the way that Hillary was defined in the public eye. And so a lot of that affirmation, people like Joe Biden, and there's a reason for that. Bernie never attacked that center of gravity. In my view, that's the center of gravity of Biden's campaign. It was electability and it was familiarity. He needed to make it so that his familiarity with the electoral system and politics was actually the negative against him.
Yeah.
The way that Hillary's was in that swamp message of betraying American middle class and working class, he was never able to do that. He didn't cut a single negative ad until post Super Tuesday.
Yeah.
My friend Joe, he could beat Trump. I mean, I can go on and on.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And I think that's all fair and true. I mean, the fact that there was no negative ad against Joe Biden until after Super Tuesday is political malpractice. And look, I think we all thought Joe Biden, after his incredible weakness in the first 3 states, that it was going to be very challenging for him.
Right.
I mean, everybody basically had written him off. But we always talked about how, look, it was going to have to be Bernie, Bloomberg, or Biden, because they were the only ones who had any diverse support at all. So, yes, there was this Bloomberg moment, and there was a lot of attention paid to him. He ultimately turned out to be a paper tiger. Eyes off the ball from Joe Biden, who was the real threat. And now we are where we are. I think there's another important piece of this to look at, though, too. After 2016, when Bernie was beaten up so much for, oh, you don't have diverse support, oh, the African-American community isn't with you, and we should be specific. We're talking about older African-Americans. Younger African Americans are with him in most cases, but there was the decision was made to pivot the campaign to be sort of more intersectional, to pay more lip service to, to racial justice, things that are important. I don't want to call it lip service, but there was an effort to make the campaign sort of more woke and more intersectional in order to appeal more to African Americans. Well, guess what? You didn't do any better with African Americans for all of that. And Joe Biden, who's like the least woke person on the planet, is meanwhile racking up massive victories, and you've now turned off white, rural, working class voters.
Which is what all of us said was going to happen. I mean, that's what I've been beating the drum here, which is that you have to talk almost so. I mean, I think about that Bernie America ad from 2016. What happened to that?
Oh, that ad was so good.
Because what was that ad about? That ad was about, this country, not a bunch of intersectional Denmark, all this international solidarity, Venezuela, Fidel Castro. It was about this country, the problems that our population faces. Then he leaned so heavily into this like woke environmental justice, economic justice. Look, again, I think all of that stuff is important, but the way that you talk about it has to be in the way that actual voters consider it in their lives.
Right.
And they view so much of that as condescending, as Ivy League speak whenever they're like, I just want to pay my bills. And in some cases, for these older African-American voters, what is their chief concern? I want to beat Trump. He needed to make that case. It was too jargony, I think, ultimately, the electability case of saying, we're going to build a large coalition, and then in a way, in these older African-American voters probably felt minimized by that because they said, well, we're part of this Democratic coalition. We've put these Democratic people in office for decades. They're like, and you're saying that you can't win without us? Like, they view themselves as key to the electoral equation, and so they were totally minimized. And from Biden's perspective, he always spoke directly to them. Now, look, I actually think Bernie was right. I think Biden is totally wrong. I don't think that's enough. I mean, what is the Democratic Party now? Under Joe Biden, it's suburbs, rich people, and black people, essentially. I mean, that's not really a winning coalition. That's not enough. Well, that might be enough to take the House of Representatives back, but it ain't enough to win the presidency. They're
about to find that out.
Yeah.
Because who do you have to worry about? Right? You don't have to worry about these suburban voters. They hate Donald Trump. They're all going to vote, right? They voted in 2018. They're going to vote for whoever the Democratic nominee is this time. What about those young voters? What about those Latino voters who are newly registered, who aren't solidly Democrats, who don't necessarily usually vote in smaller proportions than other demographic groups? Those are Bernie Sanders' strongest demographics, and you've basically told them to piss off.
Yeah,
I mean, that's and not just like, we don't want your candidate, but you're toxic, right? You're problematic. You're the problem. Your ideas are bad. Joe Biden I'm going to talk about this some in my radar, Joe Biden saying we're going to veto Medicare for all. I mean, actively smearing not just the candidate, but the people who associated themselves with that candidate. And then you're going to ask them to just turn around and, of course, we're going to have your back, Joe. I don't think it's that simple.
Tim Alberta from Politico tweeted this. I mean, there's a lot of idiots on cable news this morning be like, Joe Biden is remaking the Obama coalition. No, he's not. You know why? Because look at the amount of young voters that voted for Bernie, 70% versus 19% in the state of Michigan. Now, look, youth vote was down by 15% in Michigan relative to 2016. Disaster for the Sanders campaign.
Yeah.
But I mean, just from a generational perspective, Barack Obama united the suburbs African American vote, Latino vote, anti-Bush vote, and young people plus new voters. That's how you win 330 electoral votes. This is not. Joe Biden he basically has a Hillary coalition, which is how you lose the presidency.
Which Hillary is exactly what Hillary said.
Hillary's like, he's rebuilding my coalition. It's like, yeah, you're right. That's how you lose.
Hillary.
And so that's what's happening. If honestly, it might be even worse this time around for Biden because, like I said, you have a candidate in the White House now who is stronger on the economy, can actually appeal to some of these suburban voters. He's an incumbent president.
That just gives you a lot of inherent strength.
Always stronger. And at the same time, are these young people going to go vote for Joe? I don't know. I really don't think so.
You know, I want to play. Michael Moore was on MSNBC last night talking about exactly this. And of course, Moore is from Michigan, is where he's really focused a lot on the Flint water crisis. He's focused a lot on trade and the auto industry, et cetera. He's very in touch with these folks actually on the ground in Michigan. He's been one of the most accurate in terms of predicting. He was one of the only Democrats who predicted the rise of Trump and the ultimate success of Trump. He was asked about that idea of the coalition and what that means for November last night on MSNBC. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
It's really the question has to be asked again of Vice President Biden, of Hillary Clinton, others who said 2 months ago that they didn't know if they could endorse or vote for Bernie should he be the nominee of the party. On the 2 days that they each said that, the signal that they sent out, what they said was essentially we might just have to stay with Trump because we may not be voting for Bernie. Nobody on Bernie's side has ever said anything like that at all. So the question really has to be asked to the people on the other side of this divide within the Democratic Party as to where their ideas of unity are when they behave like this. Of course, they both walked it back. But once they put it out there, it was a sad moment, and kind of I think scared people even more. But that's I think what the intent was. So no, those of us who are actually doing this because of our convictions, because we believe that we do need to remove Trump, that is job one.
All right.
That's what's going to happen. But I'm going to tell you, I'm only speaking for myself. Those young people who are watching this right now,
I get it.
Latinos, people who earn under $50,000 a year, people who haven't seen a dentist in 10 years, people who wages are garnished because they can't pay the hospital bill because of Obamacare. The deductibles are so large. All of those people. If you don't have them in November, that's who you need to bring into the studio and talk to somebody who can't afford to go to the doctor.
So look, he's basically making that same point.
Argument.
I mean, he's saying, yes, I personally am going to vote for Joe. But I can't make you any promises about these people. You're spitting in their face, right? You have told them they're not welcome or they're not important to this party, that their ideas aren't welcome, aren't important to this party. You think they're just going to show up after you do all of that? Think again.
Yeah, again, this is not an Obama coalition. This is basically a Hillary Clinton coalition on steroids. And at the same time, you have a more incumbent president, all the strengths that he had in 2016. I just look at it as in terms of Biden and what he's putting up right now, fine to win the Democratic. Again, like I said, you can win the House. You can win the House of Representatives. You can win the Democratic primary. Can you win the presidency? Not with the coalition that you have.
And why do moderates end up exercising so much power within the Democratic coalition? It's because they're always threatening to walk away. They're always saying, you may have my vote, you may not. So, of course, those are the people who get catered to.
Yeah.
The left, on the other hand, says, oh, yeah, vote blue no matter who.
Even Bernie.
Yes, Bernie, the whole team, promising from the beginning, of course we're going to back the Democratic nominee. Of course we're going to do your unity tour. Of course Joe Biden could beat Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're going to get treated like crap. Because you haven't given them a credible reason to actually try to cater to your interests and needs.
If Joe Biden can beat Trump, why should anyone vote for you? It's one of the stupidest things a candidate has ever said on the campaign trail about one of their rivals. It actually negates your own candidacy. It's fundamental to how he talked about Biden, has thought about Biden, and all of that from the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
And ultimately, That's why he is where he is right now.
Bernie is a good man. He's a nice man. He genuinely tries to respect, Joe Biden. And I get all of that. But if you actually believe that it's existential for the working class, as I do, as you do, as most of his movement did, then that is antithetical to saying, Joe's my friend, Joe's a good guy, Joe can win.
One of our viewers actually said there's a reason Ned Stark didn't win the Game of Thrones. So I
saw that
I enjoy
comment
that.
too.
So thank you to whomever said that.
Well
At the same time, we have a little bit of
We have some good news, too, after that night of election results. So Saagar and myself and Michael Brooks and Kyle Kalinske had so much fun in New York on Friday at our show there. And so many of you have expressed an interest in hearing what that show was and what it was like. So we've made that audio available. If you go to rising.substack.com, you can see there how to download the audio, how to listen.
There you go.
Hope you enjoy it. It was, can I just say, Michael Brooks' Chris Matthews impression is the funniest thing I have heard in my entire life.
It had me laughing so hard that my face hurt.
Kyle Kalinske does a Bill Krystal impression. I mean, those guys were amazing. We have thanked them so much for participating in that. So rising.substack.com to download that audio if you are interested. All right, we're going to tell you what's on our radars. That is next.